Good morning, students. Once again, we meet for our English literature class, and today we are going to take up the next short story in your syllabus. And the name of the story is The Blue Bead. On your screen, you can see the illustration of the book cover, which contains this short story written by Nora Burke. So, The Blue Bead on your screen, as you can see, written by Nora Burke. And this is the book cover of The Blue Bead on your screen. So you can see a crocodile in the water, and you can see the blue bead also alongside, and then the title of the story and the author's name, and here is the artistic illustration of the chief protagonist whose face is not shown. This is a graphical representation of the protagonist. It's actually a 12-year-old girl whose name is Sibia. So we're going to read first about the author. On your screen you can now see the black and white photograph of the author Nora Burke. So this is Nora Burke on your screen right now, and let's read a little bit about the author before and also about her work, the different works of Nora Burke, and also a little bit about the story first before we begin with the text of the story. So let's zoom out and let's go to understand the author now. And this is Nora Eileen Burke, who was born on 2nd August 1907 in Bedford, England. So she was a British author and a well-known novelist, non-fiction writer, famous for her descriptions of life in India during the early 20th century. Now you must be wondering that if she is a British author, then how come she writes a story based on the life of people in India? That's because you saw just now that she was born in 1907, and that was the time when India was under British rule, and so British colonial rulers came from England, and Nora Burke's father was also a government official posted in India, and that is how Nora Burke had spent a considerable amount of her life, early life, especially in India. And that's the reason why she writes on Indian subjects. Now here, her father, Redmond St. George Burke, was a forest officer in India, and her early childhood was spent traveling through the Indian forests, often on elephant back. So this was more than 100 years ago, when India was under British rule, and Nora Burke's father was a forest officer, and that's the reason she spent her childhood here in India, and that's how she had a first-hand experience about the forest life in rural India, and the struggle of people who lived in areas adjoining the forests. And she had herself traveled a lot on elephant back through these Indian forests. The Indian jungle and her interactions with its wild animals inspired her autobiographical travel books. Jungle Child, which was published in 1956, that was after India became independent. She published this book. 11 Leopards, 1965, all written on Indian jungle life and Indian wildlife, animals, and people, ethnic people, based on that. And Midnight Forests, which was published in 1966, the very next year. She also wrote a short story, Journey by Night. Now that is yet another wonderful story. If you happen to read it, it was prescribed for the students of ICSE before this new syllabus came in, and now you are doing this particular short story of Nora Burke, but your seniors those who are now in 12th, they have done Journey by Night, uh, or maybe the outgoing batch class 12, they have done Journey by Night when they were in class 9. So anyway, now we come to a synopsis of the short story. Let's see what the short story is all about. This story is written by Nora Burke. Her father was a forest officer who served in India, so she spent her childhood in India. She started writing from an early age. Her observations and stories were related to her travel and sporting experiences. She was an enthusiastic traveler. The Blue Bead. Now, about the story. The Blue Bead is a story about a brave young girl whose name is Sibia, who has saved a woman's life. In the process of doing so, that is, saving a woman's life, she acquires a blue bead. She gets a blue bead, something she had been desiring for quite earnestly. She is merely 12 years old, so she is very happy to get the blue bead and is very humble even after the glory of saving someone's life. So, this is the fact of the story. What is a bead? A bead is a round object made usually of plastic or glass, which is used for making necklaces which are worn by women. So, in the book cover which I showed you earlier, I'm zooming in once again to show you the bead once again. In the book cover, I'm zooming in, and here on your screen, right in the center of your screen, you can see the picture of the blue bead. She got it quite accidentally. She saved the life of a woman who was about to be killed by this ferocious reptile, the crocodile, which was in the water. So, the story talks about a river, the story talks about a crocodile which lives in the river, and the story talks about a Gujjar woman who goes to fetch water from the river when she is attacked by this crocodile. And Sibia was nearby. She was only 12 years old. She had gone to do some work with her mother and other women of the village, and she saw this attack taking place. So she rushed to save this woman's life. How she saved her life and what happened finally to the crocodile, we shall find out when we read the text of the story. But this is the blue bead, as if like a reward for saving the life of the Gujjar woman. Her long desired blue bead finally became hers. So she found it lying in the river water, and she picked it up and she was very happy. So it did not really matter to her after saving the woman's life that she had saved someone's life. What mattered more to her was that her heart's desire, finding a blue bead someday or being able to afford buying a blue bead someday to make a necklace for herself, was fulfilled when she quite accidentally found this blue bead floating in the water, or maybe lying just under the surface of the water. So we shall see when we read the text of the story. So let's move on to now, before we begin with the text, let's move on to some more important information with regard to the short story. Here on your screen you can see Nora Burke's, and once again you can see the blue bead alongside. Nora Burke's short story has these characters. First and foremost, the chief protagonist is a girl who is 12 years old, but she is treated like a young woman by the rest of the women of her village, because in poor society, girls generally, boys and girls both in fact, generally don't enjoy the kind of childhood which you have enjoyed. Right from the time they are able to do their work by themselves, they are made to join the group of grown-up men and women to go out and earn their living. So in a family which has a poor financial status and is troubled by poverty, every mouth that has to be fed must actually work to earn the bread so that there is food for everyone. So Sibia is 12 years old. And she is the chief protagonist or the main character or the heroine of the story. And then we have the villain, the crocodile. The crocodile lives in the river water, and the crocodile performs the task of or plays the role of the villain in the story. And then Sibya's mother. We don't know her name, but she is the one who scolds Sibya when she returns home after saving the Gujjar woman's life. Sibya's mother scolds her because she is late. She comes home late. Then we have this Gujjar woman. So altogether you can say there are four prominent characters, out of which maybe Sibya and the crocodile deserve a bigger mention, because there is a lot of description both about Sibya and the crocodile in the story. Now let's look at the themes of this particular story. So on your screen you can see the themes include perception and subjective struggle for survival. So like Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, struggle for existence, survival of the fittest. So Charles Darwin had said that, and here also we see for its theme this short story has perception and subjectivity, struggle for survival, courage, colonial exploitation, that also comes out in the story, the life of poor people in India during colonial rule, how they had to struggle for survival. Because of colonial rule, there were no facilities like the government provides nowadays to the poor people of the country. So there were no such things. So colonial exploitation is brought out. Patriarchy and female labor. So patriarchy, male dominated society, and women forced to do manual labor. So that is also shown in the story. And then travel and adventure, that is there. The adventure of how Sibya saves the Gujjar woman's life, definitely. Travel, here there is movement, there is reference to going from one place to another. We have the reference of the Gujjars, who are nomadic by nature, kind of people who move from one place to another. And then karma, the doctrine of karma. That is, if you do good to others, you are rewarded. God rewards you. This world has so many options to reward those who do good. So, karma, the doctrine of karma. Sibya helps save the life of this Gujjar woman, and as a reward, as if gifted by God, she gets her heart's desire, the blue bead which she had been craving for. Now the key points in the story, let's have a look at the key points. First of all, we have description of the crocodile. So as I told you earlier, that this story devotes a lot of time in describing the crocodile. So Nora Burke actually begins this story with the description of the crocodile, where it lives, its habitat and its nature, and its food and everything. So its origins, food habits, etc. are discussed. Then description of Sibya. So after the crocodile comes the description of the most important character, that is the human character or the protagonist of the story, Sibya. Description of the bazaar visited by Sibya. The bazaar is full of stalls where sweets and textiles and so many other things are sold. So for poor people, going to the weekly market away from the village, somewhere near the town, is very important, is a major event for them. Going to the market, maybe not being able to buy anything because there is no money, but at least seeing the things, the variety of things that are being sold in the different stalls. So that plays an important role. Then Sibya joins her mother and her friends to fetch paper grass. So as I told you, women laborers, see, for survival the women have to work, and even small girls are not spared. Sibya is only 12 years old. Whereas she should be going to school, there is no such opportunity for her. This is British India, and the colonial exploitation was on, And the children of poor Indian families never went to school. Instead, they worked right from the time they were able to do their work by themselves. And the concept of child labor also comes in. So she joins her mother and other women of the village, and they cross the river, and by stepping on the stones which are in between. It's a hilly terrain with a forest alongside. So crossing the river is not very deep in all places. And then they go to the other side and up the slopes of the hills where they collect grass. Now, what do they do with this grass? They sell it to someone who takes it to they pay very little to these villagers, these village women, and they buy the grass from them. And these are the middlemen who carry the grass and sell the grass in the market, in the town, at a much higher rate. So, time and again, these people are exploited in this manner. Then, description of the Gujars, how their lifestyle happens to be, is also described. Her mother and her friends leave after collecting grass. Sibia is left behind. She decides to return home. Now, she is left behind because she had kept a secret from her mother. What was that secret? We will discuss when we do the story. Sibia meets a Gujar woman who is attacked by a crocodile. Sibia fights the that is the crocodile, rescues the woman and safely drops her to the Gujar encampment. That means the Gujars, as I told you, they move from place to place. They don't stay in one place for long, so they don't have permanent huts. They have temporary camps. And so she takes her to her camp and leaves her at her place with the rest of the Gujars. And then she goes home. Returns to take her hay fork. She had left it behind. The fork, it's a tool or a gardening tool which is used for tossing hay or turning hay over. Finds a blue bead. When she comes back to the river to collect her hay fork, she finds this blue bead. Shows her treasure to her mother. And when she reaches home, as I told you earlier, mother scolds her, but then she shows the blue bead. That is most important to her. She does not talk so much about how she saved the life of a Gujar woman as much as she is excited about the blue bead. So now we begin with the text of the story. Before I begin, let me tell you that this short story must not only be read from your textbook, whatever is given in the workbook should be thoroughly read by you. Leave nothing, read everything, so that there is no confusion at the end. I have given you the key points of the story. I have given you a briefing about the author and her works. I have also given you a synopsis of the story. Now let's begin with the text of the story. So on your screen you have The Blue Bead, written by Nora Burke, and this is the black and white sketch of the crocodile hidden in the river water. You can see its eye, one eye is very clearly visible, and it is just waiting to catch its prey. So that is what you see. Now let's read the text. You can follow either from what is written on the screen, or you can follow from your textbook also. So you see, from deep water came the crocodile, out of black water, and that's the reason why this sketch is black and white, curved with whirlpools and into the frill of gold shallows by the stepping stones. So this deep dark water of the river, deep inside this river lives this crocodile, and it came out from the water. In many places the water forms whirlpools. What are whirlpools? Where the water goes round and round. You might have seen sometimes ripples or roundish movement of water. So and then there is a reference of frill of gold shallows by the stepping stones. So near the stepping stones, that is the edge of the river, or where the river bank happens to be, there are some stones kept purposely by the locals for stepping down into the water, for washing clothes or collecting water or maybe catching fish. So in that area the water ripples or seems to form golden borderline because of the shining sun on them. He was twice the length of a tall man, and inside him, among the stones which he had swallowed to aid digestion. Now, you must be knowing, for some of you, maybe it is new, but then crocodiles often swallow stones and pebbles from the river, so that these stones and pebbles go inside their stomach and help in churning up the food which they eat and helps in its digestion process. Now this crocodile, the length of the crocodile is described as twice the length of a tall man. So if a tall man is about 6 feet tall, then the length of this crocodile from its snout to the tip of its tail must be not less than 12 feet. So among the stones which he had swallowed to aid digestion, inside its stomach there were stones. There was also something else inside its stomach. What was it? Rolled a silver bracelet. So there was a bracelet made of silver also inside its stomach. So what do you think caused this silver bracelet to go inside its stomach? First of all, it is a bracelet which is worn by women. So it proves that the crocodile must have eaten a human being, or at least part of a human being. Maybe the arm of a woman was cut off by its powerful jaws and swallowed by this crocodile, and this woman had probably gone to fetch water in the river, or probably had gone to wash utensils or clothes, and in the process, when she had put her hand inside the river water, this crocodile might have attacked and snapped off her arm. And in the process, not only did she lose her arm, with her arm she also lost her bracelet. She could have survived, or she could have died, or maybe it is quite possible that the crocodile could have possibly eaten the woman alive. So whatever be the reason behind it, but the silver bracelet was inside its stomach. Timber was being floated down this great Indian river from forests further up. Now it's a very common method of transporting timber. You see, trees are felled on the top of the mountains, and then these logs are then put into the fast flowing mountainous rivers. And what happens? These logs float downstream, and there are people, lumberjacks, they actually carry out these operations. You might have read about the lumberjacks in geography. So when the logs float down, they monitor the logs so that the logs don't float away out of sight. And in different places down the course of the river, there are people who keep an eye on the logs as they float down. And in certain places, they get trapped or jammed up because of the stones and rocks in the river water. So the lumberjacks then climb on top of these logs, go into the river water and free them, and then make them float again. In this way, logs of wood, without making use of any kind of transportation, directly these logs are made to float down the river to the lower course of the river for several miles. And this is a very common practice in almost all countries where they do lumbering operations in the mountains, and India is no exception. So that is what is being said here, that timber was being floated down this great Indian river from forests further up, and there were sleepers lying stuck around the stones. What are sleepers? These are wooden planks. These wooden planks which were floating down the river, because as I told you just now, because of the big rocks in between, they got stuck. So that is what is being described here. Until someone came to dislodge them and send them on their way. So the logs would come and get stuck in between the rocks and stones, and then the lumberjacks would come down, find out where they are stuck and free them, and then the logs would again start floating in the water. The crocodile uh, or until floods lifted them and jostled them along. And sometimes, even before the lumberjacks could reach these logs or sleepers, it would be the sudden gust or flow of more river water which would lift them and remove them from the jam and send them floating again. So sometimes a rush of water, and sometimes manually by these lumberjacks or the people who do these timbering or lumbering operations, they cause these logs to float again. So anyway, the crocodile had no need to hide himself. He came to rest in the glassy shallows along among the logs. Now, you might have often seen, at least in documentaries and films, sometimes in the Discovery Channel or the National Geographic Channel, they show these crocodiles. Very often they come out, they're reptiles, and they are cold blooded, and they come out of the river and lie on the bank of the river, and they look like logs of wood. From a distance, they may look like logs of wood, and they may seem to be asleep, but they are not really asleep. They try to take as much sunlight on their backs as they can, and then once they are warm enough, they go back to the river. They cannot stay in the water continuously, so they come out from time to time. So this crocodile did not have to fear anyone, because it was in itself such a huge monster. And even the crocodile could understand that human beings are afraid of him, and that's why he would come out and he would lie down on the river bank, drying itself or basking in the sun, taking a sun bath. So and balanced there on tiptoe on the rippled sand, with only his raised eyes out of the water and raised nostrils breathing the clean sunny air. So it is not always that it comes out completely from the water. It may come to the edge of the water where the river bank actually begins, and it could be lying just submerged. Its eyes are always visible above the surface of the water, like you saw on the book cover, the photograph of the crocodile or the illustration of the crocodile. The eyes of a crocodile are raised above its head, and its nostrils are also a bit raised above its snout. So what happens is, it can lie underwater, but it can keep its eyes and its nostrils outside the water. So just to keep an eye on the possibility of finding any animal upon which it can pounce. So it is waiting, in a way you can say, to find its prey and attack. So that's how this crocodile was lying in wait, looking for a prey. Now it could be a human being, it could be some other kind of animal, it could be a cow or a goat or sheep or maybe any other wild animal coming to drink water from the river, because just beside the river bank there was forest, and very often animals came out to drink water, and the crocodile then pounced upon them. So it is nature's way of balancing the equation that animals attack animals, and that's how they survive, because one animal could be the food of another animal. So that is how this crocodile was waiting and breathing the clean sunny air. Around him, broad sparkling water travelled between cliffs and grass and forested hills. So the water was flowing along the river that is being described. A jungle track came out of scrub each side and down to the sun-whitened stepping stones, on which a little flycatcher was flirting and trilling along. So, natural description being provided here by Nora Burke, that there was this flycatcher, which is a bird, and it feeds on flies. So it was sitting there flirting, meaning to say it was just maybe just jumping around and fluttering its wings, and maybe also whistling or singing its song and the crocodile was watching. The Magar crocodile. Now, in Hindi, crocodile is called Magar. So, because of that, Nora Burke uses this term, the Magar crocodile, uh, blackish brown above and yellowy white under, lay motionless, able to wait forever till food came. So the crocodile knows. The description of the crocodile is given here. The color of the crocodile, how it looks on top, how it looks under its belly. So all those things are given here. Simple to understand. Now the crocodile has lot of patience because it's a hunter, and when it hunts, it can lie still, perfectly still, inside the water, waiting for its prey. And the upper part of the crocodile's body has such a color that it's very difficult to make out its presence, especially when it is just under the surface of the water, because it is camouflaged. The color is camouflaged with the color of the riverbed. So that's the reason why it is blackish brown above, and it can lie motionless, waiting for its food, and that food is nothing but another animal or maybe a human. So it can lie like that for. So this crocodile was waiting for food to come its way so that it could catch its food and feed on it. Now this antediluvian saurian, this prehistoric juggernaut. Now you could be wondering about these difficult words. Antediluvian saurian means a very powerful animal which belongs to the category of lizards. Now saurian means a prehistoric animal, basically of the lizard category. Nowadays you get to see only lizards and crocodiles, and maybe you also get to see sometimes those Komodo dragons. Other than that, the dinosaurs have become extinct. So here saurian refers to that category of reptiles which walked on all fours, had long tails and powerful jaws, and some of them lived both in water and on land. Now this antediluvian saurian refers to this powerful crocodile, this prehistoric juggernaut. Juggernaut is a very forceful or powerful creature, and prehistoric is understandable because it's an old creature. Crocodiles live very long. So this almost 12 feet long crocodile was also perhaps a very old one. It was ferocious and formidable. That means you could not really face a creature like this empty-handed, or even with weapons. It was also a difficult task to manage such a huge crocodile. It was huge. A vast force in the water, propelled by the unimaginable and irresistible power of the huge tail, lay lapped by ripples. Now, a crocodile normally uses its tail to lash out at animals on land, and one lash of its tail is sufficient enough to break the bones of the animal, or even if it is a human being. And then this creature, which was formidable, it was actually a vast force in the water. So if you get inside the water and if you come face to face with this creature, it's a difficult situation definitely for you, because crocodile is the most powerful when it is inside the water, and it is propelled by the unimaginable, that means something which cannot be imagined, and irresistible power. It has this unimaginable and irresistible power of its huge tail, and this crocodile was lying lapped by ripples, a throb in his throat. So it was lying, as I told you, completely motionless, and the only indication of the fact that it was alive was the throbbing which was going on near its throat, which proved that its heart was beating and it was alive. So that was the only indication of movement in this perfectly still crocodile. His mouth running almost the whole length of his head. Now I am sure all of you have seen a crocodile, so you know very well that the mouth of the crocodile runs along the two sides of its head almost till the end of its head. So it was, that is what is being described here, was closed and fixed in the evil bony smile. So if you looked at the closed mouth of a crocodile, it seems that it is giving you an evil smile. Its teeth jagging out from the edges of its mouth on either side of its head, and it seems to have a sinister smile on its mouth, where the yellow underside came up to it. So where the mouth ended, the lower part of its body started from there. In fact, its entire body started from there. So you could see the yellow of its belly just at the edge of its mouth where it ended. It was tinged with green. So there was a layering of green because the crocodile lives in the water. So sometimes it has so hard skin that there are layers of algae which form on its skin also. So that's the reason why it was tinged with green. From the day, perhaps 100 years ago, when the sun had hatched him in a sandbank. So you see, the reference here is to the time when this crocodile was born, perhaps 100 years ago. See, I told you the crocodiles, they can live very long. So this crocodile was probably born a century ago. And how was it born? The mother crocodile comes upon the bank of the river and it lays its eggs in the sand and buries the eggs and goes back to the water. And then the baby crocodiles, when they hatch because of the warmth provided by the sand inside which the eggs are kept by the mother crocodile. So from the day when it hatched and came out of its shell and got his head out and looked around, ready to snap at anything before he was even fully hatched. So you see, a crocodile is born to snap at things. Its mouth is so big and ferocious and its jaws are so powerful that right from the moment when it hatches out of its shell, it learns it has the instinct. It has this inborn instinct to snap at things. So even if it is a tiny creature at that time, it has the inborn quality of snapping at things. And then from that day, when he had at once made for the water, ready to fend for himself immediately, he had lived by his brainless craft and ferocity. So it has this instinct to snap at things, and then as it comes out of its shell, the tiny little crocodile or the baby crocodile immediately makes for the water, because the baby crocodiles can be easily targeted by birds of prey like hawks and kites and eagles and other animals which live on land. So it seems to be born with this knowledge that once it is hatched, once it has come out of its protective shell, it must run to reach the water, because water is the place where the crocodile is going to be happy and safe. So that is what this big crocodile also must have done, according to the author. Escaping the birds of prey and the great carnivorous fishes that eat baby crocodiles, he has prospered. Now what happens is, there are a number of eggs which hatch, but not all the newborn crocodiles are able to survive, because that is the way nature balances itself. So animals give birth or maybe lay eggs from which many younglings hatch, but not all of them survive. There are fishes in the water which feed on tiny little crocodiles. So this particular monster, which is now 12 feet long, managed to survive among all the other crocodile babies born or hatched out of the eggs. This one managed to survive, and that is what the author is talking about here. Catching all the food, he had prospered, catching all the food he needed and storing it till putrid in holes in the bank. So crocodile, what does it do? It when it is tiny, it feeds on small creatures that it can find in the water. So there are many creatures living in the water, many kinds of fish, and this crocodile would collect them, catch them, and not eat all of them. Some of these it would store inside the submerged riverbank, inside the hollows of the riverbank, till they turned rotten. And putrid means rotten. Tepid water to live in and plenty of rotted food grew him to his great length. So it lived in the water, went on living there, and went on feeding on whatever it could find inside the water, and it stored its food also in the hollows in the submerged riverbank, and from time to time would feed on those stored up food items, and in this way it grew up. And for a century, almost a century or maybe more than a century, and now it is a full grown adult crocodile, huge in size and ready to attack any large land animal with its powerful jaws. So we will stop here for the day, and we will continue again in the next video, which will be again made by me, and the link will be shared with you in our next English literature class. Till then, please, all of you, please mark in your textbooks up to great length, and please be present for the next class.